She had always clocked in without fail, never once pleading for aid, until one fateful night when she did. And when her supervisor uncovered the hidden truth, he simply could not ignore it. Donovan Hale's triumphs were never delivered on a silver platter. He wrested every victory from long, lonely nights, missed birthdays, and sacrifices few could ever comprehend. From a cramped Cincinnati office to a sprawling multimillion-dollar logistics powerhouse, he built Hale Freight Solutions on one steadfast creed: relentless effort pays its due. Yet tonight, as he wrapped up poring over reports in his sleek, glass-walled office, something peculiar caught his eye. The cafeteria, officially locked down for the evening, still harbored one employee lingering near the food counter. Tasha Winston, the name he knew well enough even if not on a first-name basis, had always been that dependable soul, punctual without complaint, handling double shifts as if they were trivial, and invariably the first to respond when crises struck. But tonight, an uncharacteristic hesitation flickered across her face. Reclining in his chair, Donovan watched as she shifted restlessly from one foot to the other. With furtive glances ensuring no prying eyes were near, she approached the kitchen crew. Though he couldn't catch their whispered exchange, he noticed how the cook's brows knit together in silent understanding, culminating in a discreet handoff of a takeout container. Murmuring a quiet thank you, Tasha swiftly tucked the container into her oversized tote before striding away, head bowed and pace brisk, as if determined to remain unseen. Yet something about the scene left a bitter taste in Donovan's mouth. He had always maintained a strict boundary between business and personal affairs. His rule was simple: work hard, get paid. Still, the sight of Tasha having to beg for food gnawed at him. Here was a woman who routinely shouldered more shifts than most, sometimes double, even triple, and if anyone deserved to afford a proper meal, it was her. So why must she ask? Perhaps he was overthinking, dismissing it as none of his concern. Yet as his eyes drifted back to the report before him, the words Tasha Winston asking for food blurred into an inescapable refrain. What if there were more beneath the surface? Donovan chided himself for overreacting, reminding himself that he had deadlines and an endless litany of responsibilities that did not include snooping into an employee's private life like some amateur detective. And yet, as he stepped out into the hushed corridors of the building, his feet carried him forward long before reason could hold him back. Outside, Tasha was already on the move, striding with a determined air, though her steps betrayed a heaviness, as if burdened by unseen weariness. The biting wind whipped through the parking lot, yet she pulled her threadbare jacket tighter and pressed on. No keys jingled, no pause was taken to hail a ride. She headed straight for the nearest bus stop. Donovan hesitated, aware he might be crossing an unspoken line. And yet, when the next bus arrived and Tasha boarded, he found himself following suit. The bus lurched forward under the flicker of tired fluorescent lights as Tasha settled near the middle, pressing her forehead against the cold window. Her face was etched with exhaustion, as if she were running on empty, yet there was neither bitterness nor self-pity in her gaze, only a quiet, resigned acceptance of her fate. Positioning himself at the back to remain inconspicuous, Donovan wondered what he was truly searching for. The ride wound past the bustling business district, beyond shimmering shopping centers, into parts of town he rarely pondered. Gradually, the streetlights thinned and the gleaming glass towers gave way to crumbling brick apartments, structures whose worn walls whispered tales of time and struggle. At last, Tasha pulled the stop cord. Donovan watched as she stepped off, readjusting the strap of her bag, and he followed at a respectful distance on the opposite side of the cracked sidewalk, the air heavy with the scent of rain on pavement. Turning a corner past a row of flickering porch lights and rusted railings, she finally halted before a modest apartment complex, a building that, though it had seen better days, still hummed with the echoes of families striving against the odds. Climbing the stairs to the second floor, she withdrew her keys and pushed open the door. Donovan slowed his pace, coming to a stop just outside the building. Through the thin curtains of a window, he beheld a stark interior, not the transient bare of a new start, but the barren, persistent emptiness of long-endured hardship. A single mattress lay forlorn on the floor. There was no couch, no dining table, no trace of comfort, only a scattering of blankets and a pair of neatly folded clothes perched on a plastic crate. Then, two small heads peeked out from the mattress's edge, children. Kneeling beside them, Tasha carefully opened the takeout container with practiced gentleness. The little ones, no more than 5 or 6, crept forward, eyes wide with quiet anticipation. She divided the meager meal between them, watching intently as they ate with a desperate, silent urgency. She wasn't feeding herself, she had asked for that food solely to keep them nourished. Donovan stood transfixed as the weight of the moment sank into his chest. For years he had built his business by driving his employees to work harder, faster, longer, but had he ever truly considered what happened after the shift ended? Tasha wasn't merely enduring double shifts, she was fighting for survival. And now, what was he to do with this staggering knowledge? Unable to tear his gaze away, he watched as reality crashed over him like a runaway freight train. This was not simply an employee struggling, it was a mother, exerting every ounce of strength to keep her children fed. Tasha observed her children eat, exhaustion etched deep into her features. She did not partake in the meal herself, instead, she sat with her back against the peeling wall and hands resting silently in her lap. In her posture lay not overt sadness or fury, but a quiet resignation, a tired acceptance of the life fate had dealt her. The elder child, a girl with tightly coiled curls and wide, soulful eyes, ate deliberately, chewing slowly, while her younger brother devoured his food as if fearful it might vanish. Gently, Tasha reached out to slow his frantic pace, murmuring soft words that only a devoted mother could speak. A knot twisted in Donovan's stomach. He had spent years hiring staff, scrutinizing reports, and approving budgets, priding himself on offering fair wages. Yet here, outside that dilapidated apartment, he witnessed a woman laboring longer than anyone he knew, still unable to secure the basics for her children. Something was dreadfully amiss. The creak of the floor signaled Tasha rising. Crossing over to a crumpled plastic grocery bag tucked into a corner, she withdrew a single bottle of water, no soda, no juice, nothing more, and poured a modest amount into 2 cups before handing them to her children. That was all, it was all she had. Donovan exhaled, his breath condensing in the cool night air. He had long believed that hard work paved the path to success, but Tasha, working harder than anyone he'd known, was barely making ends meet. For the first time in years, a wave of shame swept over him as a gust of wind rattled a loose metal sign nearby. He stepped back, his mind racing with the urgency to leave. This wasn't his business, he told himself. And yet, as he turned, a small, tentative voice cut through the darkness. "Mommy, are we gonna have breakfast tomorrow?" In that frozen moment, Donovan's feet stood still. Tasha paused only for a heartbeat before tenderly smoothing her daughter's curls. "Of course, baby. I'll figure it out," she said, offering a smile meant more to soothe another than herself. And in that instant, something within Donovan shifted. This was not a mere stroke of misfortune but a systemic fracture. For the first time, he doubted whether hard work alone was enough to mend such deep wounds, and he knew he could no longer simply walk away. Returning to his car across the street, he stared at the modest apartment building as flickering streetlights cast uneven shadows. His focus was drawn to one small window, the window of a woman who had been bending over backward for his company while barely surviving herself. He knew he ought to have driven home, banishing the image to the back of his mind, convinced that there was nothing he could do. Yet this time, he couldn't dismiss it so easily. When his phone vibrated on the passenger seat with a reminder of a meeting the next day, he let it go to voicemail. For years, he had prided himself on making cold, logical decisions, separating emotion from enterprise, but now, everything was different. His mind replayed every detail, Tasha's weary eyes, the silent hunger of her children, that little girl's tender question. He realized he had failed her, not merely as a boss or a CEO, but as a human being. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, he exhaled a heavy sigh. Money wasn't the problem, indeed, his company was thriving. But somewhere along the way he had convinced himself that as long as the checks cleared, his job was done. That was a lie. What was the point of success if those who built it couldn't even afford to eat? Reflecting on his own past, a childhood of scarcity yet always a meal on the table and someone watching over him, he now questioned whether he truly believed that hard work was a panacea for all. The thought churned in his gut. His company had boasted about fair wages, yet was it truly fair if an employee could slog through back-to-back double shifts and still fail to feed her children? Perhaps he had been looking at things all wrong. A harsh gust rattled a nearby sign, and his jaw tightened with resolve. He couldn't ignore this any longer. Tomorrow, he resolved, he would speak with Tasha, not as her superior, but as a man who had finally opened his eyes. Yet a lingering doubt remained. Would she even let him help? Back at his desk, Donovan stared at his laptop screen while his thoughts roamed far beyond spreadsheets and projections. He had spent the night rethinking, overthinking. His entire career had been about solving problems, but this was not just a business matter, it was deeply personal. A soft knock at his door drew him back. "Tasha Winston is here to see you," his assistant announced, peeking in just on time. Donovan inhaled sharply and motioned for her to enter. She looked as exhausted as the previous night, yet something in her eyes had changed, a quiet weariness mixed with a hesitant vulnerability that wasn't there before. Sitting across from him with her hands neatly folded in her lap, she asked in an even tone, "You wanted to see me, sir?" Donovan faltered for a moment, uncertain how to begin. He had rehearsed countless ways to broach the subject, but none felt right as he met her gaze. Finally, he simply said, "I saw you last night." At those words, Tasha stiffened. "Excuse me, I followed you home?" Her eyes flashed with confusion, quickly giving way to defensiveness. "I don't understand." "I saw you take that food home," he continued steadily. "I saw your apartment, your kids." Her breath caught as he noticed how her fingers gripped the fabric of her pants and her body tensed, bracing for humiliation. A glance toward the door betrayed her desire to escape. "I'm not here to judge you," Donovan interjected, leaning forward. "I'm here because I should have seen it sooner, and I want to fix it." An oppressive silence stretched between them. Tasha swallowed hard, her fingers curled into a tight fist. For a long moment, she remained unmoving, silent, then finally exhaled softly. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes, I do," Donovan replied firmly. "I should have done something a long time ago." She looked away, blinking rapidly, and he could sense the internal battle raging within her. Tasha was never one to ask for help, she had borne her burdens alone for far too long. But even the strongest hearts have a breaking point, and he refused to let her reach hers. Still, how could he offer assistance without making her feel pitted, like a charity case? Her silence was thick and suffocating, as if she were carefully weighing whether to accept his offer or preserve her hard-earned pride by walking out. Finally, drawing a sharp breath with her fingers still clenched, she said, "I don't want a handout," her voice quiet yet firm, a stance Donovan deeply respected. "This isn't charity," he said steadily, "it's me correcting a mistake I never realized I was making." Meeting his gaze with a trace of skepticism born of years of letdowns, she murmured, "I've worked here for 5 years. I take every shift I can, I do everything right, and it's still not enough." Her voice cracked on the final word. Donovan exhaled and nodded, "I know. That's the problem. That someone as hardworking as you must choose between rent and groceries is a failure, not yours, but mine." Tasha's brow furrowed, unsettled by his raw honesty. "You think raising my pay is going to change everything?" she challenged. "No," Donovan admitted, "but it's a start." Leaning back with his hands folded, he continued, "I've run this company believing that hard work always leads to success, and it did for me. But last night, I realized it doesn't work that way for everyone." Tasha swallowed hard, offering no reply. "I don't want you to struggle just to survive," he pressed on. "No one who labors as diligently as you should be forced into this plight." Reaching into his desk, he slid a folder across the table. Tasha stared at it. "What's this?" she asked. "An internal program," Donovan explained. "We're rolling it out immediately. Higher wages, emergency childcare assistance, financial planning resources, not just for you, but for everyone." Her lips parted in silent astonishment, yet she offered no words. "It's not charity," Donovan clarified, "it's what should have always been in place." She hesitated, the inner conflict, pride, exhaustion, hope, doubt, playing across her face. At last, her trembling fingers reached for the folder. She lifted it slowly, her hands quivering ever so slightly for the first time since stepping into his office. Then, exhaling a measured breath, she whispered, "Thank you." Donovan nodded. "Thank you for holding on long enough for me to see it." But he wondered, would this be enough to undo years of hardship? Tasha sat, clutching the folder as if it might vanish if released. She spoke little, her expression conveying the pain of years spent not expecting help, not because she was undeserving, but because it never came. Now, facing the man who had unknowingly overlooked her struggles, she wavered between relief, gratitude, and hesitation. Sensing her inner turmoil, Donovan said something he never thought he'd utter, "You don't have to trust me today, I haven't earned that yet." Tasha blinked in surprise, then cautiously added, "But give me a chance to prove I'm serious, not just to you, but to everyone who's been working their fingers to the bone with nothing to show for it." She nodded, her gesture not a full embrace but a tentative acknowledgement, as if saying, "We'll see." That was enough for now. Rising to leave, she paused at the door as Donovan added, unexpectedly, "I want to meet them." At the threshold, Tasha hesitated, her grip on the folder tightening, not from fear or anger, but from disbelief. Who? Your kids, she asked softly. Donovan answered without missing a beat, because if I'm going to fix this company, I need to remember who I'm fighting for. After a long, waited pause, she offered the faintest nod, maybe, and with that, she stepped out, her footsteps noticeably lighter than when she had arrived. Was this merely the opening chapter of something far greater? A week later, Donovan did more than just throw money at the problem, he dove in headfirst. He sat with his HR team, scrutinized employee wages, and restructured the entire pay scale, not just for Tasha, but for every soul working themselves to the brink with nothing to show for it. He slashed unnecessary executive bonuses and rechanneled the funds, instituting childcare assistance, meal programs, and financial literacy workshops. No one would ever again have to scramble for extra food, and most importantly, he kept his word. One evening, as the sun sank behind the city skyline, Donovan found himself knocking on a door he never imagined he would approach. Tasha opened it, her eyes now imbued with a softness, not the familiar exhaustion or uncertainty, but a quiet acknowledgement that he had come. I said I would, he replied, crossing his arms. As she stepped aside, he entered an apartment that was no longer barren, a modest couch now leaned against a wall, a small dining table occupied a corner, backpacks hung by the door, and a few scattered toys spoke of a lived life. It wasn't opulent, but it was home. He paused as two small figures emerged from around a corner. Tasha's daughter, clutching a well-loved stuffed bear and gazing at him with wide, curious eyes, said in a gentle tone, "This is Mr. Hale." "Mommy's boss," the little girl added, tilting her head as if to underline, "the one who makes the rules." Donovan knelt slightly. "I used to," he admitted softly, "but your mom helped me change them." Her lips curved into a tentative, genuine smile, and with a quiet murmur she simply said, "Good." In that transformative moment, Donovan realized this was no longer solely about business, it was about people. Hard work should yield more than mere survival, it ought to unlock a life of dignity. And now, with a newfound resolve, he would ensure it did. And so, the quiet echoes of that night served as a lasting reminder, behind every tireless effort lies a human story yearning to be seen.